The blood was warm, seeping through my fingers as I pressed them against my side. The world blurring at the edges like a watercolor painting left in the rain. I stumbled against the alley wall, the cold brick biting into my palm, and all I could think was Julian's voice. Say my name, over and over, somewhere in the haze. I heard him shout, "Adrian, stay with me." But the words felt like they were coming from underwater, distant and warped. New York City was a beast, alive and unforgiving, and tonight it had sunk its teeth into me. The Lower East Side pulsed with neon lights and the hum of late-night crowds. But here, in this shadowed alley off Delancey Street, I was alone with my mistakes. Well, almost alone. Julian knelt beside me, his hands trembling as he tore off his jacket and pressed it against the gash in my side. His dark brown eyes, usually so steady, were wild with panic, reflecting the flickering streetlight above. "You idiot," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Why didn't you run?" I tried to laugh, but it came out as a cough, sharp and bitter. "Couldn't leave you," I managed, my voice barely a thread. The truth was, I'd never been able to leave Julian, not since the day we met, 2 years ago, at a crowded art gallery in Chelsea. I was 24, a graphic designer scraping by on freelance gigs, and he was a 26-year-old photographer with a smile that could stop time. We'd collided over a spilled glass of cheap wine, and by the end of the night, I knew I'd follow him anywhere. That was before I got tangled up with the wrong people. Before I let desperation drag me into a world of debts and deals, where favors came with blood-stained strings attached. Tonight was supposed to be my last job for Marcus, a low-life dealer who'd promised to wipe my slate clean if I made one final delivery. But the drop went south. Someone tipped off a rival crew, and suddenly I was dodging fists and blades in a back alley. Julian caught in the crossfire because he refused to stay away. "Adrian, look at me," Julian said now, his voice cutting through the fog. His hands were slick with my blood, but he didn't flinch. "You're not dying here. You hear me? Not tonight." His jaw clenched, and I saw the fire in him, the same fire that made him chase stories through war zones for his photography, the same fire that made him love me even when I didn't deserve it. I wanted to tell him I was sorry, that I never meant to drag him into this mess. But my tongue felt heavy, and the world was slipping. All I could do was reach for his hand, my fingers brushing against his. "Julian," I whispered. Save it," he snapped, but his voice softened as he leaned closer, his forehead nearly touching mine. "You're going to be okay. We're going to be okay." It sounded like a prayer, like he was willing it into truth. The alley smelled of rust and asphalt, and the distant wail of sirens grew louder. I clung to the sound, to Julian's voice, to the hope that maybe, just maybe, I could still fix this. But as my vision darkened, I couldn't shake the fear that I'd already lost too much, not just blood, but the chance to make things right with the man who'd stolen my heart. The first time I saw Julian, he was standing in front of a photograph of a Syrian refugee, his camera slung around his neck, his expression a mix of awe and sorrow. I'd been drawn to him instantly, not just because he was beautiful, though he was, with his sharp cheekbones and warm brown skin, but because of the way he saw the world. He didn't just take pictures, he captured souls, stories, truths that most people ignored. I was just a guy with a sketch pad and a chip on my shoulder, but he looked at me like I was worth seeing, too. We spent that night talking until the gallery closed, then wandered the city until dawn, sharing stories of our childhoods, mine in a cramped Brooklyn apartment, his in a sprawling Miami suburb. He told me about his dream to document the unseen corners of the world, and I confessed my fear of never being enough. By the time the sun rose over the Hudson, I was in love, and I didn't even know it yet. But love doesn't erase mistakes. I'd always been reckless, chasing quick fixes for problems I couldn't face. A bad loan here, a shady job there. It started small, but it snowballed. Marcus had been a friend once, or so I thought, until he started calling in favors. By the time I realized how deep I was in, I owed him more than I could ever pay. I kept it from Julian, not wanting to taint what we had. But he knew something was wrong. He always knew. "You're pulling away," he'd said a month ago, standing in my tiny apartment, his arms crossed. "What's going on?" "Adrian," his voice was steady, but his eyes were pleading, and it broke me. I wanted to tell him everything, but shame kept my mouth shut. Instead, I kissed him, hoping it would be enough. It wasn't. Now, as I lay bleeding in this alley, I wished I'd been honest. Julian deserved better than this, better than me. But he was still here, fighting for me, his hands pressing against my wound like he could hold my life together by sheer will. The sirens are closer now, and I heard voices, paramedics, maybe, or cops. Julian's face swam above me, his lips moving, but the words were lost in the roar of my own heartbeat. I wanted to tell him I loved him, that I'd loved him since that first night, but my strength was fading. As the world went black, I clung to one thought: if I survive this, I'll make it right. For him, the hospital smelled like antiseptic and regret, a sterile haze that clung to my skin as I drifted in and out of consciousness. The beeping of machines was relentless, a mechanical heartbeat that mocked my own fragile one. Julian's face was the first thing I saw when I opened my eyes, his expression a storm of relief and fury. "You scared the hell out of me," he said, his voice low but sharp, like he was trying not to yell. He was sitting beside my bed, his charcoal jacket draped over the chair, his white shirt wrinkled and stained with faint traces of my blood. His hands were clasped tightly, as if he was holding himself together. "I'm sorry," I croaked, my throat raw from a breathing tube they'd pulled out hours ago. The pain in my side was a dull throb now, dulled by whatever drugs they'd pumped into me. But the weight of Julian's gaze was heavier. "Sorry doesn't cut it. Adrian." He leaned forward, his brown eyes searching mine. "You almost died. Do you get that? I watched you bleed out. And I couldn't." His voice cracked, and he looked away, jaw tight. "What were you doing in that alley? Who were those people?" I wanted to tell him everything, to spill the ugly truth about Marcus and the debts and the deals that had spiraled out of control. But the words stuck in my throat, trapped by the fear that he'd walk away if he knew how far I'd fallen. Instead, I reached for his hand, my fingers weak but desperate. "I don't want you to get hurt," I said. "That's why I told you to stay away." Julian pulled his hand back, not cruelly, but enough to make my chest ache. "You don't get to decide that for me," he said. "We're supposed to be in this together." Or did I get that wrong? The question hung in the air, sharp and accusing. I wanted to tell him he was right, that I'd never wanted anything more than to be with him. Fully. Honestly. But the truth was a mess, and I was too much of a coward to lay it bare. The hospital room was small, the walls a sickly shade of green that made everything feel claustrophobic. Outside, I could hear the hum of the city. New York never slept, not even for someone like me, patched up and barely holding on. The doctor had said I was lucky. The knife had missed my major organs, but I'd lost a lot of blood. They'd stitch me up, but recovery would take weeks, maybe months. Time I wasn't sure I had, not with Marcus still out there. Julian stayed with me that first night, dozing in the chair, his camera resting on the table beside him. Even in sleep, he looked exhausted, the lines of worry etched into his face. I watched him, memorizing the curve of his jaw, the way his lashes fanned against his cheeks. I didn't deserve him, but God, I wanted to. The next morning, a detective came by, a gruff man named Torres with a notepad and a no-nonsense stare. "You want to tell me what happened, mister?" "Hayes," he asked, pen poised. Julian was out getting coffee, and I was grateful for it. I didn't want him to hear this. It was a mugging, I lied, the words tasting bitter. "Wrong place. Wrong time." Torres raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced. A mugging where you end up with a 6-inch gash in your friend's jacket is the only thing keeping you alive? Try again. I stuck to my story, knowing it was flimsy but too scared to give Marcus up. He wasn't just a dealer. He had connections. People who could make problems disappear or make people disappear. I'd seen what happened to those who crossed him. If I talked, it wouldn't just be my life on the line. Torres left his card, telling me to call if I remembered anything. As soon as he was gone, Julian returned, holding 2 cups of coffee. He handed me one, his fingers brushing mine, and for a moment, it felt like before the lies, before the blood. "We need to talk," he said, sitting on the edge of my bed. "No more secrets. Adrian." "I mean it." I nodded, but my heart was pounding. I wanted to come clean, but the fear of losing him was stronger than the truth. "I'll tell you everything," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Just give me time." He looked at me for a long moment, his eyes searching for something I wasn't sure I could give. Then he nodded, a small, reluctant gesture. "Okay. But this is your last chance." His words hit like a punch, echoing in my head as I sipped the coffee, its warmth doing little to ease the cold knot in my chest. I'd already given him my heart, but I wasn't sure it was enough to keep him. Not when I was still hiding so much. Over the next few days, Julian was there every moment he could be, bringing me books, sneaking in takeout from my favorite Thai place, trying to make me laugh. But there was a distance between us now, a crack that hadn't been there before. I could feel him pulling back, protecting himself, and it killed me. One night, as the city lights glittered through the hospital window, he told me about a new assignment, a photo series on the homeless shelters in Brooklyn. "I leave in a week," he said, his voice quiet. "I want you to come with me, Adrian. When you're better. Start fresh." The offer was a lifeline, but it came with a price, honesty. I knew I couldn't keep lying, not if I wanted a future with him. But Marcus was still out there, and the weight of my choices was heavier than ever. The hospital discharged me after a week, but I didn't feel free. The stitches in my side pulled with every step, a constant reminder of how close I'd come to losing everything. Julian helped me back to my apartment in Brooklyn, his arms steady around my waist, but his silence was louder than the city traffic. My place was a mess, sketch pads strewn across the floor, takeout containers piling up in the kitchen. Julian didn't comment, just set about tidying up while I sank onto the couch. Too weak to argue. "You don't have to do this," I said, watching him stack dishes in the sink. He glanced over his shoulder, his expression unreadable. "Someone has to take care of you, Adrian, since you're clearly not doing it yourself." The jab stung, but I deserved it. I'd been dodging his questions since the hospital, feeding him half-truths about the mugging. But Julian wasn't stupid. He'd seen the men in the alley, heard the way they'd shouted my name like they knew me. He was waiting for me to break, to tell him the truth, and I was running out of time. That night, he cooked dinner, simple pasta with marinara, the kind of meal we used to make together when money was tight and all we had was each other. We ate in silence, the clink of forks against plates the only sound. Finally, he set his plate down and looked at me, his eyes steady but tired. "Adrian," he said, "I can't keep doing this. I love you, but I'm not going to watch you destroy yourself. If you don't trust me enough to tell me what's going on, then what are we even doing?" His words were a knife, sharper than the one that had cut me open. I wanted to tell him everything about Marcus, the debts, the fear that kept me up at night, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I reached across the table, my hand trembling. "I do trust you," I said. I don't want you to hate me." Julian's expression softened, but only slightly. "I could never hate you," he said. "But I can't love a ghost. You're here, but you're not. Tell me what's going on, or I walk." It was an ultimatum, plain and simple, and it terrified me. But losing him scared me more. So I took a deep breath and started talking. I told him about the loan I'd taken from Marcus 3 years ago, when my mom got sick and the medical bills piled up. I told him how it started small, running errands, making deliveries, but grew into something darker, something I couldn't escape. I told him about the night in the alley, how Marcus had promised to let me go if I made one last drop, how it had all gone wrong. By the time I finished, my hands were shaking, and Julian's face was unreadable. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, his voice quiet but laced with hurt. "I would have helped you. We could have figured it out together. I was ashamed, I admitted." You're good, Julian. You see the world in a way I never could. I didn't want you to see me like this." He stood, pacing the small living room, his hands raking through his hair. "You think I'm some saint?" he said, turning to face me. "I've made mistakes, too, Adrian. But I don't hide them from you. I don't shut you out." I wanted to argue, to say he didn't understand. But he was right. I'd built walls to protect him, but all I'd done was push him away. "I'm sorry," I said, the words feeling small and inadequate. "I'll do better. I promise." Julian stopped pacing, his shoulders slumping. "I want to believe you," he said. "But you need to prove it. No more lies. No more secrets." I nodded, my throat tight. "No more secrets," I echoed, hoping I could keep that promise. The next few days were a delicate dance. Julian stayed over, sleeping on the couch to give me space. But his presence was a comfort I didn't deserve. We talked more than we had in months. About small things, his upcoming photo project, my latest design sketches, but the weight of my confession lingered. Then Marcus called. I was alone in the apartment, Julian out buying groceries, when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I knew it was him before I answered. "You're a hard man to kill, Adrian," Marcus said, his voice smooth and cold. But you owe me. That job you botched cost me a lot of money. I'm done, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I'm out. Marcus, he laughed, a sound that sent a chill down my spine. You don't get to walk away. Not until I say so. Meet me tomorrow night, or your boyfriend gets a visit. The line went dead, and I stood there, my heart pounding. I thought I could escape, but Marcus wasn't done with me. And now Julian was in danger because of me. When Julian came back, I didn't tell him about the call. I couldn't, not yet. But I knew I had to end this, one way or another. For him. For us. The city felt different now, like it was watching me, waiting for my next move. I stood on the fire escape outside my apartment, the cool October air biting at my skin, and tried to figure out how to keep Julian safe. Marcus's threat echoed in my head, a ticking clock I couldn't ignore. I hadn't told Julian about the call, and the guilt was eating me alive. He was in the kitchen, humming softly as he chopped vegetables for dinner, his presence a light in the dark mess of my life. I wanted to protect that light, to keep it from being snuffed out by my mistakes. But Marcus wasn't someone you could reason with. He was a predator, and I was prey that had slipped his grasp once too often. I went back inside, forcing a smile as Julian looked up from the cutting board. You okay? He asked, his eyes narrowing. He could always tell when something was off. Yeah, elite. Hating myself for it. Just needed some air. He didn't push, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. We ate dinner on the couch, watching some old rom-com he loved, but I barely registered the screen. My mind was racing, piecing together a plan. I couldn't go to the police. Marcus had too many connections, and I had no proof. But I couldn't let him near Julian either. The next morning, I slipped out while Julian was still asleep, leaving a note saying I'd gone for a walk. In truth, I was headed to meet Marcus. He'd texted me a location, a warehouse in Red Hook, far from prying eyes. My side ached with every step, the stitches pulling, but I ignored it. This ended today. The warehouse was a hulking shadow against the gray sky, its windows boarded up, the air thick with the smell of oil and decay. Marcus was waiting inside, leaning against a crate, his smirk as sharp as the knife he'd used on me. Two of his guys flanked him, their eyes cold and unyielding. You look like hell. Adrian, Marcus said, his voice dripping with mock concern. Shouldn't you be resting? I'm here, I said, my voice steady despite the fear clawing at my chest. What do you want? He stepped closer, his eyes glinting. You owe me a job. The last one didn't go so well, did it? But I'm generous. One more delivery, and you're free. For real this time. I didn't believe him. Not for a second. But I nodded, playing along. And Julian stays out of this. Marcus's smile widened. Predatory. Sure. As long as you do what I say. He handed me a package, small and heavy, wrapped in brown paper. Deliver this to the address I send you tonight. No mistakes. Adrian. Or your boyfriend pays the price. I took the package, my hand steady despite the rage boiling inside me. I was done being his pawn. But I needed a way out, a way to protect Julian without losing everything. When I got back to the apartment, Julian was waiting, his arms crossed, his expression a mix of worry and anger. Where were you? He demanded. And don't lie to me, Adrian. I'm done with that. I set the package on the table, my heart pounding. It's Marcus, I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. He's not letting me go. He threatened you. Julian's face paled, but his jaw set in determination. Then we fight back, he said. Together, I shook my head, panic rising. No. You can't get involved. He's dangerous. Julian. Hill, I'm not letting you do this alone, he cut in, his voice fierce. You don't get to push me away again. We're in this together, whether you like it or not. His words broke something in me, a dam I'd built to keep him safe. I pulled him into my arms, holding him tight, my face buried in his shoulder. I'm so sorry, I whispered. I love you. He held me back, his grip strong and unwavering. I love you, too, he said. But we need a plan. We spent the rest of the day talking, piecing together what we knew about Marcus. Julian suggested going to the press. His contacts in the photography world included journalists who might be able to expose Marcus's operation. It was risky, but it was better than playing his game. That night, as we lay in bed, Julian's head resting on my chest, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe we could do this. Maybe we could be free. But as I drifted off, the weight of the package on the table lingered in my mind, a reminder that freedom always came at a cost. The plan was simple but terrifying. Expose Marcus before he could make good on his threat. Julian reached out to a friend, Lena, a journalist at a small but scrappy investigative outlet. She'd been chasing stories about the city's underbelly for years, and she jumped at the chance to take down someone like Marcus. But we needed evidence, something concrete to tie him to the drugs, the violence, the deals. I still had the package, unopened, sitting like a bomb on my kitchen table. Julian wanted to turn it over to Lena, but I hesitated. If Marcus found out, we'd be dead before the story hit the presses. Instead, I suggested setting up a sting, record Marcus giving me instructions, catch him in the act. It was dangerous, but it was our best shot. Julian borrowed a tiny recording device from a photographer friend, small enough to hide in my jacket. We tested it in the apartment, my voice shaking as I practiced what I'd say to Marcus. Julian stood behind me, his hands on my shoulders, his touch grounding me. You can do this, he said, his voice steady. We can do this. The meet was set for midnight, back at the warehouse in Red Hook. I left Julian at a safe distance, hiding in a parked car with Lena, who'd insisted on coming along. If this goes south, you run, I told him, my voice fierce. Promise me. He didn't answer, just pulled me into a kiss, his lips warm and desperate against mine. Come back to me, he whispered. The warehouse was darker than before, the air thick with tension. Marcus was there, alone this time, his eyes narrowing as I approached. You're late, he said, his voice cold. Traffic, I replied, forcing a shrug. The recorder felt like a lead weight in my pocket, capturing every word. Where's the drop? He gave me an address in the Bronx, his instructions clipped and precise. I kept my questions short, coaxing him to say more, to incriminate himself. This the last one? I asked, my voice steady despite the sweat on my palms. Marcus laughed, low and cruel. You think you're done? You're mine. Adrian. You and that pretty boyfriend of yours. The mention of Julian made my blood run cold. but I kept my face neutral. "Just tell me what to do," I said, hating how small my voice sounded. He stepped closer, his breath hot against my face. "You screw this up, and I'll make sure he pays." "You understand." I nodded, my heart pounding as the recorder whirred silently. I had what I needed. Now I just had to get out. But Marcus wasn't done. He grabbed my arm, his grip bruising. "Don't play hero, Adrian. You're not cut out for it." I yanked free, my side screaming in pain, and backed toward the door. "I'll make the drop," I said, praying he couldn't hear the fear in my voice. Outside, I ran to the car, my breath ragged. Julian was there, his eyes wide with worry. Lena was already uploading the recording to her laptop, her fingers flying. "This is gold," she said, her voice triumphant. "We've got him," but I didn't feel triumphant. I felt like I was drowning, the weight of Marcus's threat pulling me under. Julian took my hand, his touch a lifeline. "We're almost there," he said. "Just hold on." Lena worked fast, contacting a detective she trusted, not Torres, but someone higher up, someone clean. By dawn, they had a plan, use the recording to get a warrant, raid Marcus's operation before he could make good on his threats. But it would take time, and time was something we didn't have. That night, Julian and I stayed in a cheap motel in Queens, far from my apartment, far from Marcus's reach. We didn't sleep, just held each other, the weight of what was coming pressing down on us. "If this doesn't work," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "you need to leave. Go somewhere safe." Julian shook his head, his arms tightening around me. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. "You're stuck with me, Adrian." His words were a promise, one I wasn't sure I deserved. But as I buried my face in his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, I knew I'd do anything to keep him safe, even if it meant risking everything. The raid happened at dawn, a blur of flashing lights and shouting voices. Lena's detective friend had moved fast, using the recording to secure a warrant. Julian and I watched from a safe distance, hidden in an unmarked van with Lena, as the police stormed the warehouse. My heart pounded with every second, fear and hope tangled together. When they brought Marcus out in handcuffs, his face twisted in rage, I felt a weight lift. But it wasn't over. Not yet. The detective warned us that Marcus's network was wide, and there could be retaliation. "Lay low," he said. "We'll protect you, but you need to be smart." Julian and I went back to the motel, packing our bags to move again. We didn't know where we'd go, but we knew we couldn't stay in New York. Not now. As we loaded the car, Julian took my hand, his eyes bright with something I hadn't seen in weeks: hope. "We're free," he said, his voice soft but certain. "You did it, Adrian." I shook my head, pulling him close. "We did it," I corrected. "I couldn't have done this without you." The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, it felt like ours to choose. We drove west, the city fading in the rearview mirror, the open road stretching before us. Julian's hand rested on mine, his camera in his lap, ready to capture whatever came next. Months later, we settled in a small town in Oregon, far from the chaos of New York. I took up freelance design again, building a life that was honest, even if it was simple. Julian's photos lined our walls, each one a story, a piece of the world he'd always wanted to share. One evening, as we sat on our porch, watching the sun dip below the mountains, Julian turned to me, his smile soft and unguarded. "I'm proud of you," he said. "You fought for us." I kissed him, my heart full. "I'd do it again," I said. Every time, the scars on my side were fading, but the ones on my soul would always be there, a reminder of what I'd almost lost and what I'd gained. I'd given Julian my heart long before that night in the alley, but it was in the fight to keep it that I'd learned what love really meant, not just passion, but sacrifice, trust, and the courage to face the truth, no matter how much it hurt. As the stars came out, I knew we'd built something stronger than fear, stronger than pain. We'd built a life, together, and that was worth everything.